All right, everybody, welcome to part 4 of our series, Healthspan Hacks, Expert Advice on How Not to Die. So I am here today again with Dr. Yurth and Lisa Tomte. My name is Courtney. I work at Boulder Longevity Institute. You've seen me on a couple of the previous sessions, just here to help moderate, keep us on time, keep us on track. But I know this past month I've had fun joining these guys, listening to some of the conversations on all the different sessions. We've covered on a lot of different aspects of health, but today is all about action and all about the steps that you as a consumer, or if you're a practitioner listening to this, that you can actually take tomorrow or next week to really get started on this journey towards optimizing your health. We'll cover on a lot of different pieces, but it'll be interesting. Dr. Yurth comes at this from being, an MD here in the States, and what she has access to is definitely a lot more and wider than what Lisa has access to in New Zealand. And I think both of their perspectives are super interesting to kind of hear how they tackle this from different sides of that equation, and what you can do, even not being a doctor or not living in the States. I think there's more that people have access to than they realize. And there's ways to get creative, which I know both Lisa and Dr. Yurth have had to figure out. So with that, I will hand it over and let you guys take it away.
Thank you so much, Courtney. So Dr. Yurth, today we're going to sort of talk a little bit about what to fix first, isn't it? It's about action, taking some steps, and where do you start? And as a clinician down here, it is often I have a process that I go through. I use genetic testing, cell blueprint testing, blood work if I can get it, questioning the client, obviously, and you have a slightly different process because you've got access to different things. And you have, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get to data, aren't we? We're trying to actually find out what is it that's ailing this person, where are they having some issues, and where do we attack first? So what's your process for that?
Yeah, so I think this is a great discussion for you guys, because it does, not everybody does have access to a physician, and that's, so Lisa has been able to kind of figure that out. And how do you work with clients and help them through this journey? Even, it's nice if we can, work together on patients, but that's not always possible for everybody. And so I think it's going to be really useful for you guys, because you're going to hear from kind of two different perspectives to hear what you can do just as, as a lay person without even having, physician access. And obviously, from my perspective, it's always nice to have more, more information. I have more access to data. But, when we were talking about, if you guys are just sort of starting this journey where, okay, I've just decided I'm going to live forever. What now? Because you can tune into a billion podcasts and get on every Instagram, and you will now be on 50 different supplements, at a few $1,000s a month. And, because everybody told you, oh, you need this supplement, you need this supplement, you need this supplement, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to, and all of a sudden your head is spinning, you're confused, and you're paralyzed by where to go next. So what I think our goal today is to really try and break it down to, okay, if you are just starting this journey, where do you start?
Yeah.
And, and I think, people like Lisa and myself can definitely be helpful, but can you do any of this just on your own if it's possible? So as we were talking beforehand, we both sort of came to one similar conclusion. That is, data is very, very helpful. So information is useful in starting this journey. If you can get information, it's helpful. Now, here in the United States, people can order their own lab work. They don't even know that, but people can actually, go pay $6 cash pay for a complete blood count and a comprehensive metabolic panel and get a lot of information. Because if you can get some basic, just what does your complete blood count look like? What does a chemistry panel look like? We went through that in an earlier, podcast, but, and optimally, what do some hormones look like? That is a really nice place to say, okay, this is a nice start. So I know what I'm dealing with. What health issues am I starting with square one? Now, Lisa has to work around that because it's not so easy for you guys to get that kind of information square one. But you do have some tools, right, Lisa? I mean, you have things that you can suggest to people on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like from the hormone perspective, and I think you and I are both fans of looking there pretty early on, if not first on in the piece, because hormones are often at the basis of many of people's problems. Not always, but often, especially if you're dealing with people in their 40s and 50s and onwards. And that's a really good place to start. And we do have access to Dutch testing, which I love, and other testing along that ilk. So I think hormones, like in your What to Fix First course, which was brilliant and people should do, you talked about, like, if I prescribe to you to go to the gym and start training and eat better, but your hormones are at really in the gutter, you're not going to have the energy to do it. You won't have the motivation, because this affects, our hormones affect our motivation, our drive, our power, our strength, our confidence. Everything is involved in our hormones, right? So if you're in the gutter, well, good luck, because you're not going to have the motivation.
I think I got actually a big argument with a physician about this, because they said, you guys are recommending all these different things, hormones and all these supplements and everything. What people really need to do is they need to sleep well, eat well, and exercise well. And you and I are in total agreement with that. But if I take somebody who has no progesterone and I say sleep well, they're probably not going to be able to.
Exactly.
Or somebody who has zero testosterone and I say go to the gym and try and exercise, they're going to be defeated after one day of exercise. So it becomes, we're asking people, yes, I agree. The paramount importance is eating well, sleeping well, and exercising well. It's almost impossible to ask people to do that in the face of not having some very basic nutrients and some very basic hormones on board. So I think it's, so if your doctor says you need to lose weight, and he says you need to, eat better and sleep better and exercise, and you're like, I'm trying to do all that, and I'm not getting, well, that's because your hormones are out of order. So I do think, and we got this, very almost vicious argument about that, because I said, you're asking people to do something that's impossible to them, and and then criticizing them when they fail at it. So I think you and I are on the same board, that you've got to address these very basic things, for people. So you mentioned the Dutch test. The Dutch test it's a urine test. Honestly, you guys can order the kit and you can get this, little urine test, and it's, a lot of times you need somebody maybe to walk you through it, but that, Lisa or I can walk you through that test. And, and it's something that you get the kit sent to you, you pee on a little piece of paper 4 times throughout the day, and you have a wealth of information. In fact, not only hormones there, but what is your adrenal glands doing? What B vitamins might you be missing? What does your gut look like? There's tons of information. This one simple urine test that can be, done at home. So I think that's a really nice, nice kind of starting point. And then you've got some other tools you use too, right, Lisa?
Yeah. So one of my favorite tools, which actually doesn't cost anything, is something that Dr. Brian Walsh, who's a cellular health expert as well, has devised. And it's just a questionnaire that I take people through. It takes 10, 15 minutes. And it gives me just a pointer, a scale out of 1 to 15 for each of these different areas. And it might say to me, hey, go and check the virus. The virus load in this person is really high, or they have blood sugar dysregulation, or they have hormonal issues, based on the symptomology. And, it's scientifically backed, and he's researched this for a long time. And that really just gives me okay, that's the direction, 1 or 2 or 3 directions that I need to go to first to help this particular person. And then, bring in the blood work, bring in the Dutch test, bring in the thyroid test, bring in whatever is required after that, the genetic testing, all of that sort of thing can be brought in after that. But that's a good, cheap way of getting started with some data collection.
So is that actually available online for people, or do you have to work through a provider?
I actually have access to it through one of my teachers who's actually done it online in an online formula. So no, it's not just available, but it is something that I can access without having to pay for it. And I'm not sure whether Dr. Walsh has it publicly available in another format, quite possibly. And it's just a really good tool. And there are actually some good questionnaires out there that can just give you a directional push, this, have you got some gut issue? Has you got virus? Is this hormonal? Is this? So then you have to go and dig deeper into that particular area. But that's a really good way to screen, right? instead of like, I don't know where to start with this person. This person might present, say, with sleep issues and anxiety and depression and no energy. Well, that could be a hell of a lot of things, right? That could be anything from a
virus. It could be toxins.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so it's trying to pinpoint what that is, and then what to triage and what to fix first. Going back to the name of your course, it is really about, because often when you get to your 40s and 50s and beyond, you've got a multiple
there's lots
shit
of
show happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's true.
And it is, and I totally agree with what you were saying about that, the other doctor having that argument. Well, you just need to do the better sleep and do the better exercise and reduce the stress. Well, good luck with that, guys. Like we all know, like you and I are always running on adrenaline and stress. We know we have too much stress in our lives. Can we change it? Not really.
Right.
We can do things to mitigate the damage of it. But if your progesterone's low, ladies, you're not going to be sleeping.
Right.
And that's
brain fog. You're not going to be sleeping. You're going to be irritable.
Anxiety.
And remember, progesterone's dropping at 30. So this is not something that you even, 40, 50s, progesterone is dropping at 30. In fact, a lot of you young women who are in their 20s, who have like really bad PMS, a lot of those people have low progesterone. So low progesterone is really, really common. And you can even buy, if you have symptoms, and those are little things you can do online too. You can do little questionnaires about hormones and say, wow, this really looks like I have low progesterone. There's even some natural ways, right? That you can, so now it looks like, wow, I'm not sleeping, I'm irritable. Maybe I'll try a little natural progesterone. You can buy, at least here, probably not in where you guys are, but but some kind of natural ways to kind of raise those things. But I think that it becomes a lot more difficult for people in Australia and New Zealand to access those kinds of things. But at least it gives you, okay, this does seem to be hormonal. Can I maybe approach a doctor there who I could talk to about it? Or somebody you talk to about it, right?
And you can find it, and sometimes you can get some of those sorts of things in nowadays, and sometimes it's a bit, touch and go. But and sort of understanding that, what these hormones do. Like none of us are educated in our basic hormones. Like. A woman in perimenopause, menopause, who's got hot flushes, they're told, oh, you just have to deal with it.
Right.
No, you shouldn't just be dealing with it. There is things that you can do, and it's actually damaging for you. It's damaging,
right? I think that's the other point, is that people sort of think about these symptoms like hot flashes. They're like, oh, so big deal. That's not a big deal. Actually, that's a sign of imbalance in your limbic system. It's so basically there's other things. Every time you have a hot flash, there's other things that are going awry. These are not little sort of just uncomfortable things. They're things that are affecting your brain, your vascular health, your cardiac health. So it is important not to just neglect them or say, well, this is just normal for your age. It's not. And nor is not sleeping or not being able to build muscle or exercise, right? And so those are all such important things that we just sort of take for granted. And I know you guys have all faced this, where your doctor goes, you just need to work harder at it, eat differently, and that's an impossibility. So
normal for your age. I hate that saying.
Normal for age. Hate that. I know.
I'm never going to be normal for my age. Thank you very much.
It was funny. One of the first things when my old MA at my other practice, she said whenever they would hire a new MA, the first thing they always told the new MA, secretly to me, was, whenever you see doctors, never say you look good for your age. Just say you look good.
Exactly.
Good for my age. I just want to look good.
Exactly.
I just not feel good for my age. I actually want to feel like I did in my 20s, right? Not good for my age. And we should expect that. Instead of expecting, that we're going to decline, we should expect that we stay healthy and we stay well. So we have to change that expectation that, okay, well, I'm going to get old. Things are going to get worse. They shouldn't. I mean, that then something's going awry in your body if things are getting worse, right?
Yep. So, and that's the whole longevity anti-aging space right there, is because we're trying to prevent those things that are seen as normal decline. And a lot of it, I think, too, is the mindset of it. If, like that study that came out, I can't quote from where, but it was, if you think yourself younger, your cells are actually younger.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that. Like that, when I see girlfriends or friends from school days, and some of them are just much older looking, not just looking, but they're
Right.
when you start talking to them, they're like, I'm an old grandma now.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, when did that happen?
Yeah, maybe that's one of the first things we were talking about. Okay, what is the first step in this plan? The first thing is to understand that you need to sort of think differently, right? You need to think that I am going to live healthily and well as long as I want. And maybe that's the first thing, is maybe mindset. We'll put that above even our lab testing. That's the expectation, right? That I am actually going to be well. Because if you don't have that expectation, which I think a lot of people don't, right? They're like, oh, well, or they think, they don't want to live to be 100 because they picture being 100 as being a little old wheelchair bound person, or, and not a healthy, vital 100-year-old who's still playing tennis and doing active things. So I think the first thing maybe in our sort of scheme is, as you sit there and talk to yourself, can you actually picture yourself as this young, healthy person? Because that mindset is going to be paramount to everything else. So, so we'll start there. Second piece, then maybe get whatever information you can, be that Dutch test, be that online quiz, whatever you can, to start saying, okay, where am I starting? What is my starting point? And where do I need to focus? So I think that would be then maybe our second step. So first would be change your mindset. If you can't change your mindset, then start there. Start watching people who are, start interacting with the 100-year-olds who are vital and healthy instead of the pictures you see.
With Mum, she was asked in a documentary they were doing about her, and they said to you, do you hang out with other people who have had strokes and aneurysms and older people? And she said, hell no.
Right. Yeah.
And it came across quite, I don't want anything to do with them, but it was meant, I hang around young people, people that are significantly younger than me. I go to the gym, I do things so that I'm surrounded by people who are on a mission. And I said that last week, I think, that the reason being, and I, this is the thing, like with our culture now, with, we put old people into rest homes and hospitals,
away from
and
other
we
people,
shove them away out of society. And, that's a discussion for another day, but in society, we should all be mixing together the intergenerational wisdom that can be shared when you are around people of different age groups is part of this believing you're younger and you have a use still. Because when you start to believe you no longer have a use, you're no longer of use to your community, and then you're going to bugger off quicker, aren't you? Yeah. Because so having a purpose, the mindset, the purpose, and then going into things like the hormones, look at your hormones, look at that situation. And there, we talked last week on hormones and the misrepresentations of the, like the Women's Health Initiative and the way it was interpreted and the taboo around hormone replacement therapy. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. And we're still undoing that sort of damage and trying to educate people. And yes, you need somebody who knows what they're doing when you're going to go on hormone replacement therapy. But it can be quite powerful. I mean, I've experienced it in my life and I know it and I feel it. I went for a few months without doing a test and had COVID and had other stresses and had a lot of stress in my life, and then was feeling like shit. And then I went, hang on a minute, I'll go and get my hormones done again. Yes. Got my hormones, and it's like, oh, there you go. I was on hormone replacement, but I needed to up the dose because.
Yeah. And that's interesting because actually, and there's something to remember, for instance, COVID actually, when they look at hormones, there's this big drop in hormones after people have had COVID, men and women. Testosterone levels have been, halved in a lot of men post-COVID.
Wow.
So, so that's something to keep in mind too, is maybe you were going along feeling fine and now you got sick or had some life stressor and all of a sudden things are worse. Hormones may well be to blame there. And so, I think we really have to focus a little bit on, trying to get those as optimal as you can to go to our next step, and then once you're there, once we've got this baseline, then you and I both agree that there's some baseline nutrients that probably everybody needs as well, right? I mean, that it's not the big fancy stuff. You're going to, most of that stuff you're seeing on Instagram being sold to you is the big fancy stuff. That's icing on the cake to start taking, your NAD supplements and your spermidine and all those different things, that you're seeing by the Instagram influencers or hearing on podcasts. They're great things, right? Yeah, they're wonderful things. They're super good. But you've got to have some very, very basic things that probably everybody, even very young people, need, because our food sources suck, right?
And this is the thing. It's a food replacement. It's not. So I break it because people go, oh, so many pills to take. And I'm like, yeah, break it. But those ones, that's part of your food chain.
Right.
And if we listed them off, like, zinc, magnesium, selenium, your B vitamins, your
methylated B vitamins.
Methylated B vitamins that are activated, and methylation we can talk about.
Methylfolate. Everybody needs methyl B12, methylfolate, right? Agrees. Zinc, selenium. A lot of people need a little copper. So there's, even a very small dose of copper can be really useful depending on symptomatology. If you've got neurologic symptoms, things like that. Or those of you who have very low ferritin levels. If there's a very low iron level, sometimes that's because copper is not there. So, and you have to have, that zinc copper ratio has to be balanced as well, right? So if you're taking a whole lot of zinc, you might need a little 1 milligram of copper at least a few times a week. It's a very small dose of copper. One of the tricks to getting copper that I tell people is you can buy online just skin copper peptides. Just in a lot of cosmetics, and copper peptides are great for your face, but you actually get a little systemic absorption, so you get a small dose of copper as well. So it's a nice way of getting them, so you can help your wrinkles as well as helping get a little bit of low levels of copper in you. So I think, everybody needs D3 with K2. I mean, there's
with K2.
With K2,
very
right?
important.
Right. Those two have to go hand in hand with each other. So I think, and I just think a basic, I don't know how you feel about just a basic multivitamin, but I have most of my clients just on a good basic multivitamin, and, and then adding a few of those little extra things. I think, so those are your basic nutrients, right? Probably just to survive, unless, they've shown even now, if you're growing your own food and you still, the soil is just deplete of nutrients. Magnesium, 90% of people are low in magnesium, 90%.
Even though when you're taking supplements, like that one surprised me. I got my magnesium test back last week, and having just had COVID, my magnesium levels were through the floor despite supplementation.
Right.
And
because
I was like,
after being ill, after being sick, right? When your body's been in a stress situation. Remember, magnesium, you need magnesium for muscle, you need it for bone, you need it for brain, you need it for blood vessels.
DNA.
It affects everything, right? So it affects everything. So those are, but it's the basics, guys. You got to start with the basics. And then, once you've got those basics, so now we've got the basic hormones, we've got the basic nutrients in order. Well, now we can start saying, okay, let's now look at your lifestyle. Let's really say, okay, what is your eating regimen? When are you eating? What are you doing for exercise? And what is your sleep like? Right? Because we know that sleeping at, in the dark at night, without having had your blue light exposure for, watching your cell phone before you go to bed, or get on your computer right before you go to bed. Those are all going to be circadian disruptors, right? So I think monitoring sleep is helpful, and you can do that with things like the Oura Ring or Apple Watches, this Whoop bands. There's tons of ways to actually monitor sleep too, to see, are you getting adequate deep sleep, REM sleep? Is there disturbances in your oxygen at night? So I think getting that sleep piece down, and again, you take hormones to help with that. But and that's where, like magnesium, right? Not sleeping well at night, magnesium before you go to bed is going to be a big help, just to help you sleep at night, right? So
I have a complete routine, because I used to be a terrible sleeper, like just terrible insomnia. And, I'd be studying till late at night. I'd be like, working until midnight, and then wonder why I'm not sleeping. And now I have a very strict sort of routine where I do my yoga, just 10 minutes of light yoga at night when I start to wind down, and I have the lights very low in the house, and I have my blue light blocking glasses, and I have my chamomile tea, and I have my magnesium, and I have my GABA in my case, and I have, during the day I'm getting ashwagandha and rhodiola and stuff that's going to support, my adrenals, which are always being hammered, so I have this whole routine, and it might sound like a lot, but actually it takes me a couple of minutes now to get everything sorted. And oh man, the sleep, melatonin is another thing I put into the mix, and you can, that's part of the Dutch test. You can sort of see where your
Yeah,
melatonin
melatonin levels are exactly.
Yeah, and that's really, because as you get older, you produce a lot of these hormones like melatonin less, and of course that's going to help you go to sleep, melatonin. And if you have got cortisol dysregulation, we can also see that on the Dutch test. Like the cortisol awakening response. What is your cortisol doing during the day? All of these things can give us. And it takes work, and it takes a bit of time, and it takes every night doing the thing, doing all these little habits that I do. And then it becomes like a routine. It's like when you've got a 2-year-old, you don't give them chocolate, make them run around the house, play loud screaming games, and then stick them in bed 2 minutes later because they're like,
yeah.
like
and yet we all do last week before we go to bed. We're looking, making sure our phone, no one sent us any messages, and, or people are filtering, going through Instagram right before they go to bed. So I agree. You've got to have that sleep hygiene. So I think if we were to say, okay, paramount first is, get some data, get your hormones, basic nutrients in order. Then we're going to work on that sleep hygiene piece, because again, if you can't sleep, nothing else is going to go very well. Right.
That's the other, I think, that sleep as a leverage point before the exercise, before the food.
Yeah.
So we've gone from mindset to hormones, and maybe, adrenal and HPA axis, maybe, and then sleep. Like sleep would be my number one priority from the lifestyle interventions before food, before anything else.
Yeah, I think we don't focus on that a lot, right? So people always think diet first. Well, we know very well if your circadian rhythm is disrupted, and even if you're eating the exact same diet, that people will get fat, they'll gain weight, right? So we know that people eat the exact same food, but at the wrong time, like you're eating right before you go to bed, or you're a night shift worker, and having to eat during the day, so that circadian rhythm will screw up everything else. Your ability to get strong, your ability to absorb nutrients, even. So I agree. I think that we maybe are focusing a little too much on, people diet and exercise, and not focusing, that first piece you have to get under control is sleep. And I agree, melatonin can be a really useful thing. If you're somebody who falls asleep and then wakes up, a lot of times those people they're like us, a very sympathetic type 8, sympathetic overcharge. Right. They're go all the time. So those of you who are like that, you've got stressful jobs and stressful lives, and you're just go. Remember, that's your sympathetic nervous system. There's a tiger chasing you. You got to get away. That sympathetic drive is fine. It gets things done during the day. But at night, you have to turn off the sympathetic overdrive and turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. That's that relaxation, zen, get your heart rate variability up, gets you into nice deep sleep patterns. So those of you who are, kind of either awakened very easily at night, a lot of you are running on sympathetic tone overnight. Simple way, if you do have anything that can measure your heart rate variability, and I like the Aura Ring because I'm not getting EMFs and things from it, but I can look at my heart rate variability. If my heart rate variability is low, I am in a sympathetic nervous system driven state. So how do I turn off that? How do I do that? And there's some very cool devices out there, even to get to sort of turn off the sympathetic drive and turn on the parasympathetic. Melatonin does that. So there's
hyperbaric does that.
Hyperbaric is a great tool for that, right?
Yeah, not that everybody has one of those in their house.
Right, that's a little harder. There's a great little device you can order online. It's called the Nirvana Zen, XEN, made by a company in London, I think. And it's a little earbud that you control your phone, and it basically gives a little vibration sense to your eardrum. The vagus nerve travels from your brain past your ear, down your neck, and all the way to your gut. It's the biggest nerve in your body. It connects our gut to our brain. And that vagus nerve, when it's stimulated, it turns off sympathetic nervous system and on the parasympathetic nervous system. So there's a couple ways of stimulating it. One is electrical impulse at the neck, but a really easy one is this little Nirvana Zen. And I know they have like a sale on it right now for Cyber Monday. Oh, you guys are Tuesday now. Okay. It's still on sale. But you basically, it gives a little vibration. Can't even sense it to your eardrum. That actually turns up the vagal tone, turns up on the vagus nerve. You can have people do that before go to sleep, and it can really help those people who are constantly awakening, who are, those of you who know you're just this kind of, I'm always in this state, right? So that's a really, easy thing you can do on your own. So these are, you can figure that out by either measuring your heart rate variability or just knowing I'm somebody who wakes up constantly every little noise wakes me up. I wake up, I can't fall back asleep. Those people are sympathetic driven people.
Yep.
So
we need to calm
so
that.
you got to combat that, right? Because you're not going to.
I've got another great device for you from a company called Violite, and they have the Neuro Alpha, or I've got the Neuro Duro, which has got alpha and gamma frequencies. And at nighttime I use the alpha frequency, which I think is 10 hertz. Don't quote me on that one. And that then trains my brain into that slow down rhythm. And really helps me sleep as well. So I've been testing that device for them, and it's just, it's fabulous. And then on the other side, during the day, if I'm going to go and do a workout, I can use the
other stimulation,
the gamma and 40 hertz, and that will get me ready to.
It's a little head. It's like a little headpiece.
It's a headset, with a thing up your nose,
and
you've got all these little diodes. Right.
And people can just buy that themselves. They don't.
They can. Yeah, and if you're interested, use code Tamati at checkout, and you'll get some discount. But it's a really good thing. Violite.com. And they're testing it for Alzheimer's and TBIs and sport injuries, and I've had Mum on it for years actually with her brain rehabilitation side of things, and now I'm testing out their new device for and I'm finding the sleep one really great. So I put that on for 20 minutes while I'm watching telly or something at night, and it slows those brain waves down. That gets you into that alpha state, because I can't get there very easily.
Right.
And meditation, meditation is brilliant, but you try and get me or you to meditate.
Right. It's almost impossible.
We need it.
Right. If you're somebody, meditation is wonderful and it's doing the exact same thing, but there's tools for those of us who are not good at that, right? There are tools like the Violite, like the Zen. There are tools that will help you get there. So you can't just go, well, I'm just not that kind of person. There are tools that will help. And so, these are things that are at your disposal, but prioritizing sleep, I think. So we've got, mindset, labs, hormones, nutrients. Get your sleep in order, get that circadian balance in order. And then I think next, probably nutrition and exercise kind of hand in hand. Yeah.
I think those two, you can't, as an ultra endurance athlete, when I was a young athlete, I used to think I could eat whatever I like because I trained so hard. Right. And that was so wrong. In fact, if you're training that hard, you really need to pay attention to the nutrients that you're putting in, because you're doubling up on the oxidative stress and the inflammation in the body, and you're using up all your hormones and your cortisol and everything else, right, to the nth degree. You actually better double down on the nutrient side of things.
Right.
It's not
your
like
B vitamins,
Yeah. Whereas I used to think I can eat anything. I can eat as many donuts as I like because I'm running it off, right? It didn't work.
You're right. You can't exercise your way out of bad nutrition. So maybe we put nutrition a bit above exercise from that realm, right? That you can't, you could be the greatest exercise in the world if you're eating nothing but, all your calories out of sugar. You're really not going to see the benefits of the exercise. You're not going to, build big muscles. You're really not going to have good overall health. In fact, you might even look like you as an ultra endurance athlete, right? You look super thin and very fit. But
I wasn't back then. But that's the interesting thing. If you look at photos of me back, when I was doing the actual racing, I was like 7-8 kilos heavier than I am now.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, and the difference is,
and more body fat, and had higher body fat too, or
absolutely higher body fat, and struggled with weight and everything else, and struggled with hormones and inflammation, infertility, you name it, I had it, right? And I was always like, well, I just need to train harder, because I'm just not doing enough. Actually, I completely overwhelming my system with oxidative stress and causing all these issues.
Right.
And so I've lived that one. I've lived that. And when I actually now and I see a lot of chronic over exercises in the realm that I'm in, and it is chronic over exercising, and partly that's becomes addictive, and partly it's your sport that you've chosen and stuff.
Right.
But you have to be aware of it, and you have to then counteract it as best you can. And you shouldn't be doing, in my opinion, after doing it for 25 years, the opposite. You shouldn't be doing ultra marathons and things back to back to back to back.
Right.
Not if you want to live a long time.
Not if you want, right. If that's your gig and that's what, but understand, like any excessive behavior, you'll pay the price. And, and for some people, maybe paying the price, that's worth it to them, right? That,
temporarily,
right.
Absolutely.
So we all have to make those choices, but do understand, it's funny. listening to a lecture from an ultra endurance athlete and, listening to all this stuff. And I said, and he went from being a drug addict actually to being an ultra endurance athlete.
Was it Charlie Engle?
Yeah, Charlie Engle, right?
I love Charlie.
Right,
he's
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, he's great, right? But now what he's doing now, he's like doing this incredible event, right? And I'm like, I sat there listening to him talk, and you're like,
totally
really just switched one addiction to another. And I'm not actually sure it's any healthier, quite frankly, than what you were doing before.
No, and it isn't. And he has, but like it is swapping, it is a dopamine driven personality. And from a genetic perspective, he would, not have enough dopamine, and therefore he's chasing it. And I've got the same bloody personality type. So I know that exactly. And I did swap one thing for the other. And now I've swapped work and study and research for that, right? Okay, so we can probably all talk about work addiction or running addictions or stuff, but it is an excessive behavior that you have to be cognizant of, and you have to actually, counter it. And you can achieve some amazing things with a personality like that.
Right, exactly. I mean, those people do accomplish great things, right? But understand
the cost.
Understand the cost that goes along. I think people don't. They look at people like you're like, oh my God, she's like, look what she can do. It's amazing. Not understanding what price you did pay for, right? And what is, is that whole Instagram and movie thing that, wow, this is amazing. Look at that person. Yeah. And it's not all well and good.
Couldn't have children, those sorts of things are major things, that I regret, obviously, the damage that you've done and stuff. And so, quite passionate about that. And going in with your eyes open. So if I'm training ultra athletes, let's do 1 or 2 events a year max, and let's recover like hell in the between. Rather than just back to back to back. And of course, this is a world of, macho, I can do more and be more. And
you're right. And we put a lot of, like those people we honor, or we put them on pedestals. We're like, wow, look at all the things they're doing. And I think that you could take that from an ultra endurance athlete to even, some of the people who you look at who are, you're like, achieving great things that is, but even like in our lives where we're really studying and working with people all the time, and and not taking the downtime, the same thing's true in our lives. There has to be the give and takes. If you're going to be working like that, then there has to be the downtime too. The hey, I'm going to turn everything off and just relax.
And now I'm preaching to ourselves.
None of us are so good, right? None of us are so good at that.
Not good.
We can preach it very well, but we can't meditate. We can't back off. So I think, if we say, okay, and then from a nutrition perspective, I think this is, nutrition's difficult, right? Because now we've gotten into, okay, the way we should all eat is this time restricted eating, and, eat within smaller windows. And where that falls short, and I think that is good. We know there's longevity benefits to intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, but where it falls short is the whole, if you're trying to accomplish a lot, your body needs more protein.
Yep.
Right. So even in these phases of, okay, I'm always going to eat with this 4-hour, 6-hour window, that may not be something that's sustainable constantly.
Yep.
So I think from a nutrition perspective, nutrition is one of the most confusing arenas for people, because we hear, okay, eat this, don't eat meat. Oh no, eat nothing but meat. Eat within a 4-hour window, but actually you need 120 grams of protein. Well, you can't do that in a 4-hour window, right? So I mean, when you're talking to your clients, how do you start? How do you approach that?
Yeah, for first of all, I do love the genetic piece of the puzzle for that, because there is genetic makeups that are made differently. My genetic makeup, I have a lot of adrenaline, oxidative stress. I need a lot more antioxidant support. I need a lot more protein support. My mum, for example, is another genetic makeup that has ability to go for days without eating. From a evolutionary perspective, that was the way her genetics evolved. So she has a high predisposition to metabolic dysfunction. So she can get away with a lot less protein and a lot less carbohydrates. Unfortunate for her, right? Because she doesn't get to eat as much, right? But she's lost 58 kilos in the last 7 years. So we have nailed it. Whereas like previously she couldn't lose weight. She'd be that typical mum, looking after everybody else, getting fatter and fatter, and going to the gym and not knowing why, and eating her rice cakes, and rice crackers, and thinking, why am I, I've cut out the donuts and the bread and the sugary stuff, and I'm still getting fatter and fatter, and because we need to have for her a time restricted eating window for her, and she shouldn't eat at night time too much, especially on the carbs. So her biggest meal of the day for me is lunch when I'm with her, is having a decent sized lunch with a good amount of protein and a good amount of carbs at that time of the day, and then a smaller vegetable based dinner with a little bit of protein in it, and not snacking in between. My body type can get away with a little bit more snacking, although I shouldn't be snack like I used to think. You need to keep my energy levels up, but I do need to keep my protein and my fat levels up, the good fats and stuff. So I burn through things a little bit faster. I have a shorter digestive system. She has a much longer digestive system. So all of these nuance of that conversation, right, we can pick that up in the genetic information that we get through one of our programs, the epigenetic program. So that's where I start. And then I also look at what are the requirements of this person, what age, what sex, what symptomology do they have, are they athletes, all of that sort of thing, is to try to guide. And I do not think there is a one size fits all diet that everybody should be keto or everybody should be carnivore or everybody should be vegan. I think and like you, and I've learned this from you actually, is cycling. Cycle in and out of things, both with your supplements, your exercise, and your nutrition. And that's the way we evolve. That makes sense to my brain,
Right. Yeah. So if, so for instance, I'll go through phases, number one, I'm going to, kind of circle back on protein a little bit, because I think we're finding more and more in a lot of the newer literature that we, for the most part, most of us are protein deficient. Even if you look at someone like your mom who does need less protein, obviously you do.
Now she does need more.
Now she needs more protein, right?
She's older.
She's older, right? So as we get older, we used to think, older people, they don't need as much protein as that 25-year-old weightlifter. Actually, the finding is they need more. There was just a great study that came out in bone density on, we look at all these pieces to bone density. Protein played a huge role in bone density as people age. And so I think we've created a little bit of a protein deficiency, and it's hard to get enough protein. I mean, it really is.
Quality protein,
good quality protein, especially if you are an older person with a poor appetite. For instance, like one of the women who works in my office, who's in her 70s, fell and broke her hip, and and her bone density is horrible. And and when I look at what she eats, because her appetite's not great and her digestion's not great, she's very, very protein deficient. So now we're adding things like bone broth 4 times a day, things like that, to just get nice, easily digested protein stores in her.
And betaine and digestive enzymes and those sorts of things, because a lot of older people too are deficient in their ability to actually break down the foods that they're taking. And you being an orthopedic specialist, that so many older people die because of they've broken their hips, or that from bone density issues, not necessarily from the other stuff that we're all told to be scared of.
Many more women will die from a hip fracture and a decline after that than they will from breast cancer. And yet we're giving nobody hormones and, and things like that because we're afraid of their breast cancer risk. When their heart disease risk is much higher and their fracture risk is much higher. And that's what
brain suffers.
Die from the brain, right? And that's what more women die from. So, so when you look, I mean, probably a lot of people, you're looking at now, 80, 100, 120 grams of protein. And the problem is, if you're trying to do that in a 4-hour eating window, remember, we can't really assimilate that much protein in one sitting. So the way I work this is I go through, phases where I'm doing 150 grams of protein for a few months, and then I'll back off and I'll do a little bit more time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, where my protein stores do go down a little bit. I'm more in a sort of, so I go from growth to back off. And you're right. This is how we genetically develop.
Autophagy,
right?
And I think
that food that's constantly available.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to have, that growth phase. We talk about mTOR and AMP kinase, and we've talked to, these 2 pathways that regulate our growth and our cleanup cycles, if you like, and cycling in and out of that time of the year where I'm building muscle and I'm in that growth phase, and then time of the year. And I like to do it with the seasons too. So winter more in the growth phase, because your body doesn't like to lose weight in the winter, because
you need that's sort of designed to kind of bulk up during the winter, right?
And so that's what I try and bulk a bit of muscle up in the winter, and then in the summer you naturally tend to lose a little bit more weight. Your body lets go of it for some reason. I don't quite understand why, but that's a good time then to do a bit of clear out, and a bit of
Right.
autophagy and eating less, and and that's easier to do in the summer than in the winter when you're starving because it's freezing and you're using up a lot of energy just to stay warm.
I think, and we'll kind of close with that at the end, but it is that thinking cyclically, and I agree seasonally is great. So thinking about these sort of, quarterly changes where I'm going through, 3-4 months of buildup, 3-4 months of I'm going to be in a more restricted phase, 3 or 4 months of buildup. And so by doing that, number one, you feel less deprived all the time. And number two, it does allow your body to sort of cycle. We even know that from a perspective of, for instance, insulin-like growth factor, IGF levels, there's this whole, low IGF levels pro longevity, but high IGF levels are pro health. How do you balance that? It's
that one is confused.
It's confusing, right? But that's because it's a cycle. It's really designed to go up, go down, go up, go down. And what Lisa mentioned, that mTOR, mammalian targeted rapamycin. So mTOR is kind of our buildup, our growth, right? So if you look at your bodybuilder, they're in an mTOR driven state. And then AMPK is the opposite of that. Generally we want to have AMPK higher and mTOR lower for longevity, for not dying, right? Mm-hmm. But if you always run in that state, then you get kind of emaciated and you don't have much muscle and you feel shitty and you're more likely to fall and break something. So by cycling that up and down a little bit, right? AMPK, then that mTOR come up a little bit. You can actually make some nice headway in terms of longevity and still keep muscle mass and stay fit and healthy. So I do think thinking about your diet that way is a really good thing to do. So staging between that, more I'm going to do growth. I'm not going to restrict my eating quite so much. I'm going to eat more high protein and then backing off and doing more of your time restricted eating. It's a really nice way of doing things. In general, I agree with you. There's people who do great on keto. There's people who, I'm not a huge fan of the carnivore diet. I think people, if you're always eating just carnivore, but there's people who, from an immune perspective, it can be very helpful temporarily, right? So I even think within the diet type you're doing, that probably even changing that up a little bit.
Yeah.
And agree genetics can be helpful there just to help you kind of cue. And this is where I'm designed to be, and then you got to find a little bit what does work for you. Right.
I do I love looking at everything through the evolutionary lens. And that's what the genetics has taught me, is that we have basically evolved into different, without getting into the singular genes now and the, whatever genes, but in the gene groupings, there's general groupings of people, and we've sort of evolved from a tribal perspective to take different roles within that tribal community. Right. And that makes sense to me. Like I can, mum's role back in the day would have been the mother bear of the community, who could go without food, who could lift heavy loads and go for a long period of times, and had good endurance and good strength, but not so agile. Shouldn't eat too much, and as far as the metabolic side of things go, had a great immune system, good bone density from the get-go. Right. And I've, I would have had more of that warrior type archetype, if you like. I would have been the one out, chasing
out for the food, looking for
and then coming back, but more nervous system issues. So my predispositions are to have nervous system problems. So I'm very, like the fatty acids and things are very important for me, that I keep my nerve conduction good, my myelin sheath's good, and all that fatty acid and the protein, and so there's general groupings that you can sort of look at from that basic, even from that body type perspective. You would have heard of the ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph. Even if you can't get fancy genetic testing, which gives us a lot more nuance.
Right.
If you know the basics, are you an ectomorph? Are you an ectomeso like me? So I've got a little bit of muscularness to me, but I'm more on the
but you're not husky built. It's like
yeah. And then there's others who are just massively built and they're strong, big bodies, and understanding those groupings, if you like, and that those groupings have got more digestive issues, and those ones have got more metabolic, and those ones have got more nerve. That alone can give you a bit of an indication of what types of food to eat and when to eat it, as a generalization of just groupings, without getting, which I love the nitty gritty of the genetics, because then you can really tailor. And like you said, like even though mum has a predisposition to not needing as much protein and not needing as much calories and carbs and things, that's different now because she's 81 and we're dealing with different medical problems. And so, at that age, you do need more protein, even though, but so she's a protein sparing type.
They change by what you're doing. And,
Yeah. So there's nuance to that conversation, and there's nuance to everything, people. If anybody is black and white, and
that's why it is sometimes, having someone to work this through with is definitely helpful. But we also want to give you tools to how can you face this on your own for those of you who don't have the opportunities to work with somebody like Lisa.
Yeah.
So we got now. So we went to fix the circadian rhythm, and then we work on nutrition, and then last in that piece would be exercise, right? And I think you and I both have a big bias there that you've got to do strength training.
Muscles.
You have to have muscle, right? And anybody who tells you otherwise, if you're just somebody who's doing your cardio, and I see this all the time, people are just doing cardio, especially if they get older, they're going out, I run 5 miles a day, and they're doing no strength training. It is not going to serve you well. You have to have muscle, right?
Yep. Yeah. Lots of runners are so guilty of that. And,
really
they have great cardiovascular health, fantastic. But sarcopenia, osteoporosis, you can see them starting to bend over as their muscular, because running and endurance sports are catabolic and they're not anabolic. And we need to counteract that. If we're going to do those types of sports, we even need it more to be working on the anabolic, on the protein building, on the muscle building. Muscle is endocrine active. It's burning calories, it's holding your metabolism up, it's keeping your thyroid in better shape, it's keeping your hormones. When I go to the gym and I lift heavy weights, I've got more testosterone in my body.
Testosterone, right? That's one way of just increasing testosterone independently, right? Is simply lifting weights, lifting heavy things, which if you're just running, your testosterone levels actually go down. So did
you hear that, guys?
I mean, that's huge, right? And and until a few years ago, we didn't actually understand muscle as its own organ, that it is producing what we call myokines. It's producing its own hormones and proteins that influence the brain, that influence inflammation. For instance, if you have high levels of inflammation, like interleukin-6 in floating around your bloodstream, so you're just highly inflamed. There's genetic people who just they have higher levels of interleukin-6 or high levels of TNF alpha. When you exercise, you actually take that out of your system and you put it into muscle, because interleukin-6 is good for muscle, helps it grow. It's not good for you systemically. Wow. It's great for muscle.
Didn't know that.
So by exercise, I take the interleukin-6 out of my system where it's creating bad things, and I have it in my muscle where it's helping me. So, and then muscle secondarily produces brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So we know it's important for brain health, right? Strength training is super important to maintain your brain. So we now understand there's, at least 500 myokines that have been discovered, and probably more, that are influencing your liver, your kidneys, your brain, your heart, that are coming from muscle. So if you have no muscle, it is affecting every other organ in your body.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the more muscle you have and the less, the more fat, if you get more fat and you've got less muscle, you might weigh the same, but you've got a heck of a different body than if you've got a body that's very muscular.
Right. So, fat is also metabolically, it is also important. So fat is also producing things just like muscle is, but mostly bad things. Mostly
bad things. It can produce more testosterone if you've got a little bit of fat, funnily enough. So there are some good things, but when you have too much fat, you're going to have a lot more inflammation, especially that central adiposity, around the middle as well.
Right, that visceral adiposity, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're middle-aged,
guys get that belly fat.
Yeah, and if you even women, you see women, and they're usually in their younger years have a bigger hips and bum and thighs, and actually that's not too bad a place to have it, but when it slides upwards, it starts going around the middle, and you get a skinny bum and a bigger waist. Then that's from a metabolic perspective, not from an aesthetic perspective, but from a metabolic. I have a situation with my dad who did not look overweight, but when we did a body scan, crikey, we had a lot of fat around the tissues that you couldn't see. He did not look overweight.
Right.
So don't, just because you don't have a protruding gut, or it doesn't mean that you don't have that central adiposity.
Where that body fat lies, and you could do like a hip to abdomen ratio, right? Yeah. And that alone, even if somebody doesn't have this big protruding belly, if they've got more narrow hips and a wider belly, those people are at higher risk than the opposite.
And these people often have skinny legs and skinny everything
right.
else, and so they don't look overweight.
Right.
I'm working with an old lady in her 80s at the moment, and she's diabetic, and she's got metabolic dysregulation, insulin, and she's tiny.
Right.
It doesn't look like it,
doesn't look
right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't. You don't necessarily think, because when you think, diabetes, insulin resistance, you think really overweight people, but sometimes those smaller builds and those ones that, just hold it around the middle, that's the dangerous stuff. So if your waist circumference has increased since you were 20, you have it. Right. You have some insulin resistance of some degree,
And then that brings us, so now you take the next step, which is where all the Instagram influencers are, what are some of those other cool supplements that you can take, that are helpful, like the, NMN supplements that actually will build NAD levels, spermidine, which helps with autophagy, berberine, all those very those are icing on the cake, right? But they're too often to me where people go first is they go to, I just heard this really cool supplement, I'm going to start taking that, and unless you've just addressed it in the order we just went through. Mindset first. I can picture myself as a healthy person who's going to live to be 120 and be fit and healthy and still doing everything I want to do. Number two, understanding where my hormones and nutrients, getting those down. Number three, working on the circadian rhythm. So getting my sleep in order. Number four, getting my nutrition in order. Number five, my exercise. And then lastly, you start adding in those pieces that are the icing on the cake, because the icing on the cake doesn't work. It doesn't work to take, all these
foundations.
Without the foundational health there. I see people all the time. I don't know if you see this. They come in with their list of supplements that's 4 pages long. It's like, I'm taking all of these and I'm not feeling any better. And I'm like, well, let's look at your sleep. Let's look at your hormones, some really basics. I mean, we sort of tease about that because we have this group of people who are all these kind of biohackers who are doing
I've been guilty of
biohacking cool things, and yet they don't have the basics in order,
and I've been guilty of that because and you like to test and try everything out, but I think go back to basics, start with the things that are really going to make an impact, and not to say those
cool things are cool and they can really help, right? They can take you to that next level. Right.
We both
we could talk all day, right? We could talk all day about how valuable these are, but they're valuable in the face of everything else being in order, right? If I have zero hormones and no zinc and no vitamin D, my spermidine is probably not going to do a whole lot.
Yeah, exactly. How are we going, Courtney?
We are right on time. That was perfect. No, thank you guys. Thank you for that recap as well. I mean, I want to just sort of bring this all full circle where, we started this session talking about resiliency, right? Our very first episode was all about resiliency. And I think it's important to note that when we talk about action here in our last episode, one of the first action items is mindset, right? Yeah. And actually capturing that mindset. And I encourage people who are maybe just tuning in now to go back and check out that first episode around some tips and tools to build that resiliency and build that mindset. Because you're right, I can do everything else. And if I don't actually have the mindset that meets those health goals, a lot of what I'm doing is for naught. So I appreciate that you guys kind of started with that and kind of set that as the baseline. And then to weave it in even further, our second episode here was all about education and how important it is to go learn and get data, right? And that's what you guys sort of said is the next step. All right, once I have the mindset around this, let me go get some data, whether it's super concrete because I can get all the labs and the bloods, or it's a little bit more survey based and an evaluation, like you said, the cell survey that you're talking about, Lisa, but at least get some data to start making educated decisions on. And then our third episode was all about research. And so all of these, tests and tools and things you guys are mentioning to help with hormones and sleep and nutrition and exercise, make sure you're getting things that are vetted and researched that have the science and the backing behind them. So you're not necessarily wasting time on the hot, hypey, cool new thing. So I just want to kind of weave that all together because I encourage people to go watch this whole series if you've just caught a couple episodes here or there, because everything that we talked about today as far as action, really there's a lot of layers that we could do 12 more episodes, 50 more episodes. I'm sure you guys could talk forever about.
Yeah, pretty good. That's a beautiful summary. That was great.
Yeah, we didn't even try and do that, Lisa, did we? And
no, we didn't. Yeah, we just naturally. And Courtney caught that beautifully. You caught that beautifully and wove that story. You should be an MC.
No, I think it's important because it's core to who you guys are, right? And I think that's why those themes came. I remember talking months ago when we were planning all of this and trying to put these outlines together and what could we talk about. And it's cool to see how it all, I just sort of caught that at the end, how it all came together. So no, I had fun. I hope you guys had fun. Lisa and our team have some other things in the works and other cool stuff coming. Yeah. So stay tuned. But thank you guys. And I will see everybody next time.